Hi everyone, Aidan here with etrailer. And today we're going to be taking a look at, and later we'll be showing you how to install the Airlift 1000 air helper springs on our 2023 Toyota 4Runner. Now whether you're towing a trailer or you've got your whole 4Runner built out as an overlanding rig, suspension enhancement makes a ton of sense. And the reason you might choose airbags is for the adjustability. Let's say your rig isn't always the same. You maybe deck it out a little bit differently for summer or for winter. Maybe you sometimes tow a trailer and maybe sometimes you're just not at all. Airbags can be adjusted to fit a variety of different air pressures and give you different load leveling capabilities. So if you've got a light load, set them to a lower PSI. You got a heavier load, fill them up a bit more, and you can level out your rig with that added weight. That does mean it's going to be a little bit more involved for the install process, but the end result for the person that is changing their rig out quite a bit is going to be much better because alternatives like sumo springs or timbrins aren't going to give you any adjustability at all. They'll be good for one setup, but that's it. And if you are looking at suspension enhancement to level out your rig, again, I think airbags make the most sense because if you've got a lot of problems with squat on your 4Runner, say you are towing a heavy trailer and it's causing the back end to sag a bit, really nothing else will level out your 4Runner in the same way that airbags will. And some of the benefits to having a more level towing setup is that you're gonna get much better handling, better braking power, your headlights aren't gonna be aimed to the sky if you're driving at night, things like that. Some things to keep in mind with airbags though is that you need to have some sort of air pressure in them at all times. Airlift recommends a minimum of 5 PSI, so there will be some level of maintenance to these because you do have to keep up with that like you would the pressure in your tires. And then in addition to that, they're pretty much always going to be engaged. Whether you have a load on your ball mount or loaded up on top of your roof or not, you're going to feel them. So it's going to have an effect on your ride quality a bit. But now that we've talked about some of the benefits of airbags, why you might choose them for your 4Runner, let's take it inside so we can see how they actually look once they're installed. These airbags are the style that will sit inside your coil springs. And what they're going to do is offer up to 1,000 pounds of load support. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean your 4Runner is ready to handle 1,000 pounds. You still want to abide by the payload limits of your vehicle. That's just what the airbags can help support. And with that, there's going to be an adjustable range of pressure anywhere from a minimum of 5 PSI, which you typically want to keep in the bags at all times just for maintenance purposes, all the way up to 35 PSI. You can adjust those using the included trader valve so that you can get this dialed in exactly for your load and make sure that your rig is level. That trader valve can be installed really wherever on your vehicle you find works best. For us today, I opted right between our hitch and our wiring here for our trailer, just so it's nice and easy to access. And it does include caps for those trader valves to keep them protected while you're driving. The other thing is that your kit includes enough pieces to run this as a dual path or a single path system. We opted for a single path today where this one fitting will send air equally to both bags. You might choose a dual path if you've got an offset load, say you've got a big roof platform and maybe you've got a really heavy tent that kind of goes off to one side of your vehicle and you want to be able to offset the air in one side versus another. You might choose that path, but I think for most people on a 4Runner like this, a single path will be just fine. Now, if you decide that this is the right solution for your 4Runner, we'd love to see a review and maybe a picture of your rig to show us what you're using the airbags for and let us know how they're working out for you. Now, if this installation isn't something you want to tackle yourself because it is going to be a little bit more involved, you can use our dealer locator to find an installer local to you to help you get these installed. But if this is something you want to try for yourself, I will say it's a fairly straightforward process. The springs do have to be removed, but they actually come out really easy. And there's a number of things you can do during the install that will make your install easier for you, like removing your spare tire temporarily, or if you're doing this on the ground, maybe even removing your wheels and tires off the side altogether. We couldn't drop our spare tire today because our neighbor has a full platform bed set up inside his vehicle and it would just be a lot to tear apart just to get to that spare for us. So the way you're seeing us do it is probably the harder way, but even with that, I found this was actually pretty straightforward. So if this is something you want to try for yourself, follow along and walk you through step by step. Now, there's two different ways you can get your vehicle set up to start this installation. For us, we've got it on a lift right now that allows our wheels to hang down and our suspension to open up. But at home, you probably don't have that. So find some level ground, get your vehicle parked, emergency brake on, get the front wheels chalked, and lift the rear end up. You can lift by your hitch typically and let that suspension hang, but you do want to find some way to support the rear axle because we will be removing that rear coil spring. If you are doing this at home on the ground, I'd say if you want to give yourself way more room to work and make it easier, you can remove your wheel and tire on either side. Again, it's not totally necessary, it's just going to be a quality of life thing that helps you get to all the pieces you need when removing that coil spring. One thing I'm going to do before we get started is mark the very top of our coil spring here so that when we reinstall it, we get it aligned properly. We're going to start by removing our lower shock bolt though. This will take a 17mm socket, and you'll have one of these on both sides of the vehicle. Once you break it loose, it should go pretty smoothly. That being said, this vehicle is very new and low miles at the time of filming, so your results may vary. Once you get that undone, you can pop the shock free here. It's on a sleeve right now. You might find that it starts to give you a little bit of trouble here. If it does, you can take a pry bar and push it out, or you may need to lift up on that rear axle to relieve a bit of tension. Just push that to the side for now. Next, we'll remove our panhard rod bolt, just the one on the driver's side, right below the coil spring there. And we'll use a 19mm socket for that. Then we'll have two brackets, one on the driver's side for our brake line, and then another on the passenger side for our ABS. Both of these are going to get removed using a 12mm socket. Make sure you pull the bracket away from its mounting location. And at this point, your instructions are going to tell you to remove either the lower or the upper mount for your sway bar end links here. Basically, we just want that sway bar disconnected from the frame, so when we drop it all, it's going to separate just fine. What we're going to do instead is actually just go to these sway bar mounts because they're going to be easier to reach. I'm going to remove those with a 14mm socket on either side. Now, this is going to be hooked on, so just apply a little bit of downward pressure and unhook it. You want to make sure that you save all that hardware for reinstallation later, so put it somewhere safe where you're going to not lose it. And at this point, we can start to lower that axle down enough to where we can get our coil spring out. You should reach a point where you see that spring start to unseat itself, and you should have a fair amount of room to move this pretty easily, actually. So we'll just take this and set them both aside. This will just remove from the spring, and we need to cut this down, not quite like all the way to the base here, but 1, 2, 3, 4 sections. So right at the joint there is where we need to cut through. Something like a Sawzall will work really well here, but you can use any cutting device that you have at your disposal. Just be careful with it. This cuts through really easy too. Now we want to come back to that base that we just cut free and go to the middle here. We want to enlarge that hole here using a 1/2-inch drill bit. I'm just going to set it right on top of the spring so that when my drill passes through, it's not going to hit the ground. we'll do that for both. We can then take our air line that's provided in our kit, find about the halfway point, and we're going to cut this in half using a pair of hose cutters. We want this to be a nice clean cut with a sharp blade. You can place that in there, try to get it nice and perpendicular, and give it a snip. You want this edge to be as close to a perfectly straight 90-degree angle as it can, no burrs or anything like that, because anything like that is going to cause this to have some potential leaks. Looking at it here, it could maybe be a little bit more straight, but you want to just get that nice and clean. From here, we can take one of our airbags and insert it through the top of the coil spring with that air stem facing up. I'm just going to turn it on its side for right now, because what we're going to do from there is take our cut airline tube, pass it through the top of our modified hollow spring there, and we want to place a hose clamp on the end. So the way we'll do that, it's really small, but I'll try to keep my hands out of the way as best I can. Take a pair of pliers, grab onto those teeth right here, and as you squeeze it, it'll open. So place that over the end of our airline tube right there. Push to connect this to our stem. Want that to fit down all the way. And then we can use our pliers to get that clamp over the stem to hold it there nice and tight. Just like that, and we'll repeat that for the other side. We can take this whole assembly, making sure that we have the driver's side that we initially had for the driver's side so that our marks all line up properly. And what you're going to do is take the other end of your airline, and we're going to feed that through a hole in the center of our upper spring seat, right there. For now, I'm just going to push it over and make sure that it feeds out the other side somewhere where I can access it later. And we can put everything back in place the same way, or rather in the reverse order of how we removed it. Once we've got it set in place, we can turn it and align the marks that we made earlier, and repeat that process. But with both bags in place and the springs looking nice and aligned, we can start to raise our axle back up. Now as you're doing this, make sure your airlines are nice and clear of any moving parts. We've got a lot of things we need to line back up here, and the last thing we want to do is get one of those lines pinched. So I just tucked them up nice and high, pushed them through any old hole in the frame rail that I could find, and all the coils just kind of helped it stay up and out of the way. But what we'll do here is just make sure that the springs stay aligned how we wanted them to, and get all of the hardware we removed reinstalled. Now as you do that, there are going to be torque specs provided in your instructions for each of those different bolts that we removed. So make sure you go back through with the torque wrench and get those all torqued back down to spec so you can be driving safely. And again, all those torque specs for the hardware we removed can be found in your instructions. Just repeat that for all the remaining bolts. At this point, you want to run your airlines to the back where you can fill them. We already did, and I'm going to show you the path that we took. Now we opted to join these together with the included T-fitting right here so that we only have one Schrader valve at the back. We'll start here with the driver's side bag since we're right next to it. You can see I zip tied it up here, and it just tucks up right there to where it popped out before going into the bag. Now the passenger side had a little bit more ways to travel. There's a point right here behind your spare that you can zip tie it to keep it out of the way. From there, it goes straight up and over our heat shield, where it comes out right next to the airbag. This one's gonna be a lot harder to see, but there is a path over the heat shield there, so it keeps it nice and protected from our exhaust. From that T, we went straight up, nice and high. We zip tied it off to this metal piece here, continued further along, tucking this up and above our cross member, where it came out right over here, and I zip tied it to this wiring harness going into our trailer connector right there. Our plan from here is to have the airline tube feed directly down through and have the Schrader valve mounted right here, kind of between our trailer wiring and our hitch. There's a bit of plastic right here, and just above that is a little thin piece of metal with a pretty decent sized cavity above it, so there should be room for all the hardware to back that Schrader valve there. And this will keep things nice and available to us when we are wanting to fill with air, but also out of the way for things like our spare and our wiring. I'm going to drill right here. There is a small hole to the left of this on the driver's side if you want to be able to look through and kind of see where you're going. We're going to check that out, so I'm going to drill a 5/16 hole. So we're going to get our Schrader valve all set up here. It's going to be the same process with the hose clamp as you saw with the bags. It's the same process you would have used for the T-fitting as well. So get that hose clamp attached, take the end of your Schrader valve and push it in. Now if you didn't do it already, if you had any factory cuts of that hose out of the box, just redo those. Ours were super crooked, so that's something I did just before getting this attached so I could make sure I had a nice flat connection there. You can place that hose clamp over. From there, we're going to attach a hex nut and a star washer. This will be the backing for the Schrader valve here. We're going to pass this down through that hole that we drilled. And once you get it to pass down through, you can put the rest of your hardware in. It's going to comprise of a rubber washer, metal flat washer, and another one of these hex nuts. You may have to hold the back of that as you push that rubber washer on, just because it's a pretty snug fit there. And I will say it's a pretty tight fit in general to get that down, but with the right angle you can get it to line up. We'll thread that on. You can tighten that nut down with a 13mm or 1/2 inch socket, and we can fill it up now with some air. I'm going to go to like 30 psi and we can test for leaks. We'll just spray down each of our connection points with some soapy water. What we're looking for is any bubbling at the connections. That'll let us know if there's any air leaking out. And once we've verified that all of the connections are leak-free, we're good to go. Once you verify that everything is leak-free, you can go back and tidy up any loose ends that you may be left, whether that's a zip tie that needs the end trimmed off, or some hose that needs to be zip tied up and out of the way, high from any hot or moving parts. You're done. Overall, not too bad of an installation process, and even though you have to get those coil springs taken out, it's really not too hard, and you don't have to fight with them all that much, so for me, that's a really big win. I hope this video was helpful in showing you how to get these Airlift 1000 helper springs in place. My name's Aidan, and thanks for watching.